I'm going to probably go to some kind of computer-infused art school where I can learn a good deal about game development.
So you're into video games.
Mm-hmm.
Video games have become less geared towards a certain market. It's more integrated into sort of everyone's lives. So what's kind of like your take on that? What have you seen with that?
I'd say that's definitely true. I think mobile gaming has definitely brought a lot of people who normally wouldn't consider themselves to like be one to play video games into that market. I think they're all included in some way. You know, I think you can say to most people, you know, oh, remember that Mario game? And everybody's going to have some kind of association with it, at least everybody that's within our generation, because although we didn't grow up with it because that was a little bit before our time, I'd say that it's still an integral part of our history, especially since maybe our parents imposed that on us, or it's just something you learn about because it's like a major character. And it's really interesting because it's just something that doesn't exist at all. Mario's not real, you know, obviously, but it's something that everybody knows, like it's a common concept.
Right. What part of the video game sort of culture do you think you take part in? Because there's very.
Yeah, exactly. I think definitely I want to be able to make games which bring people into them using storytelling and try to change their point of view. I'm more of a single player story based kind of person, and while I think that it's important to have mechanics in a video game, because definitely that's something that a lot of single player games get hate for, I think it's important to be able to tell a story more than anything.
Yeah.
Because there are games that do that in some way, but mostly incorporate some kind of multiplayer component that like bogs down that story, that really just like it has to change the story a little bit to be able to fit in that multiplayer component.
Do you have any examples?
I think that Halo is a good example of the video game Halo. A good example of the way that's evolved, because originally it was meant to be half kind of a game that you can play with your friends and half kind of a game that really tells this grand story about, you know, some space marine that's really interesting, you know? And it really had opportunity to continue with that. The problem is with the advancement of other games in the similar genre with mechanics, they had to keep up, so they had to add their own things in and focus more on that than really the story, and it really changes the way the game advances. So by now there's really much more of a focus on the multiplayer and how it, you know, brings people online together. And I want to be in the field that views games as largely an art that like enhances storytelling with interactivity, because it really changes the way a person perceives what's going on, as opposed to just watching a movie. If you were in the movie, you know, it's obviously very different.
It's interesting that you say art, because video games are perceived in so many conflicting ways, where some people see it as a piece of art, some people see it as a sport, some people see it as just a hobby. Yeah. I mean, where do you see it as?
I think it's an interesting blend of all three of those things, because it's really, and you know, I know for a fact that there are plenty of people who can become addicted to it. It's just like a, you know, so obviously it's not just an art form. It's like an interactive media that really not only involves the consumer, but in most cases revolves around the consumer and focuses on how to get them to want to be involved in that game. And I think that's largely a part of what makes popular or largely funded games the way they are, because they all have to kind of pander or, you know, advertise to a certain market in a certain way. Each game does it differently, but some of them focus on trying to act very competitive or have a high level of mechanic so that people think it's very competitive and want to play it as a sport. So the people who view video games as more of a sport will want to play that game, or people who have an association with an ongoing series of games, they want to make sure that their newest game looks like something different while still including the old features to bring everybody into it.
Is that something you would want to do?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm really interested in the idea of a series of video games, because it's definitely hard to live up to the standards set by the first video game if it's successful enough to warrant a sequel, right? If you already have a story in mind for all of these games, like if you were basically planning out what is the equivalent of a movie trilogy in a video game, I think that's definitely possible, but I have a hard time saying that it's a good idea after a game has been successful to just say, hey, let's make another one.
Right. Well, that's hard to say, though, because, I mean, when it comes to a movie, you can stop making a movie because, I mean, it's the end of the story, right? But when it comes to a video game that's so immersive that it's a game, so the technology will improve and graphics will improve. So by adding on to the story, you're creating I don't want to say a better game, but don't you think that there is value in continuing the game?
That's true. If your game is unique enough to be able to put out there for an audience, then that probably means you've invented or innovated in some way. And that means that later on you'll want to be able to bring it back so that those innovations and the things that made the original game unique will make the new game stand out, but within the new graphical and mechanical components of the systems or whatever is advanced in that amount of time.
Right. Well, I mean, if your original goal wasn't to create a series, but it becomes successful, you look at a game like Dishonored.
Yeah.
It was just some project that Bethesda released, and then it turned successful, so they added on to the series with the new console and more advanced technologies. You said that if the original intent isn't to create a series, that you should end it where you originally wanted it to end. But since it's so immersive, do you continue it now that it's successful, or do you quit it despite the fact?
I think a direct sequel, like I said, is still a bad idea, but I think that it's possible to create like something alike to a spiritual successor, or maybe just a spin-off game set in the same universe. If that's what made your universe, or that's what made the game unique, was something like the universe, like let's say Ratchet and Clank. That's a really unique universe, a really cool, immersive place, and a really interesting, set of characters and things like that. Maybe if you didn't want to make another Ratchet and Clank game, like I would probably not have, unless that's what they were planning. I would never know, really, but to me personally, it would disappoint me to just make another sequel just for the sake of it. I would probably take that universe and put new characters in it.
My underhanded summer jam escaped with a free game in my back pocket. The ego anthem of the year left clear off the concrete valley to murder silhouettes with a